Green, where culture meets biblical truth. Weekdays at 1 Central on AFR.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Iran claims that President Trump is lying about diplomatic talks as more Iranian missiles hit Israel. President Trump says he ordered a 5-day halt on planned strikes against Iranian power plants because the deal was close. Former Army Special Ops Intel analyst and Fox News contributor Brett Velikovich says the administration has been very clear that its objective is not endless war, but decisive results.
And so right now we're seeing this, not just this symbolic bombing campaign. This is the strategic dismantling of the enemy's entire ability to fight so that they can never toy with nuclear Armageddon again. So there's a lot more, obviously, that can also be done from the air to continue that leverage. Air campaigns like this, they don't just destroy targets. They're going to collapse entire systems. You're degrading logistics, command and control networks, communications, resupply chains. And I think what we're already seeing is that Iran's missile and drone output has dropped dramatically because of these strikes.
The family of 41-year-old Stephanie Minter, a Virginia mother stabbed to death at a Fairfax County bus stop on February 23rd, is demanding action and accountability from local prosecutors after it was revealed the suspect is an illegal alien with a lengthy criminal rap sheet. He had over 30 prior arrests and several charges dismissed by the Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office prior to the killing. Jason Miyares is the former Attorney General of Virginia.
Tragically, Stephanie's story, and it's heartbreaking to hear, it's not a coincidence. This has been a deliberate policy by government officials in Fairfax not to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. And Steve Descano, the local prosecutor there, the district attorney, he's one of these left-wing social justice prosecutors who views himself as a welfare worker, not a prosecutor. Has a policy, and he lists this on his own website, that he will take into consideration your immigration status. And what we've seen is a consistent pattern of charges being dropped, no pros, by this prosecutor because he doesn't want them to get a felony.
The chaos continues at many U.S. airports as lines grow longer because of staff shortages caused by TSA workers not getting paid. They're going without paychecks because Democrats refuse to pass a bill to fund DHS. Fox News contributor college freshman Brylan Hollyhan says Dems are willing to hurt the American people to further their goal of more illegal immigration.
And this kind of thing should remind people when they sit through this chaos to look around and say, this is how badly Democrats want illegal aliens to get to vote, that they're willing to see you sit in line and suffer. So thank a Democrat when you're waiting in these lines, but the outrage is true. Gen Z sees through it. All outrage is the entire modem of the Democrat Party. They don't have good candidates. They don't have good policies. So they're having to use fear-mongering to win the midterms. They did it in Minneapolis. Now they're doing it in airports.
A California school district is making headlines, and not for improving test scores. Chris Woodward explains.
Merced City School District in California approved a proposal from a company called Schoolyard Rap that included things like an African American infinity group for 100 African American students in a summer rap camp. These cost the district $270,000. Meanwhile, Paul Runco of Defending Education said the district has spent close to $1 million on consultants for DEI initiatives and student race-based programming.
In our view, there's really two issues here. One is spending, how much schools are spending on programs like this instead of, let's say, reading remediation or intensive tutoring. And then the racial discrimination, basically saying these programs are for students of a specific race and not for others.
Runco recommended people in other school districts and in other states take a look at what's going on where they live.
Parents really need to be aware of not only the programs that are going on in their schools, but who their school district is contracting with and how much money they're paying these consultants for what is probably illegal and highly discriminatory programming.
AFN is seeking comment from Merced City School District. I'm Chris Woodward.
And finally, officials say an oil refinery fire near the Texas coast has been put out and a shelter-in-place order has been lifted. Mayor Charlotte Moses says no one was injured in Monday's explosion at the Valero refinery in Port Arthur. More news online at afn.net and on the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Every day, AFA offers biblical insight on issues that others aren't willing to touch in the hopes that you'll become a world changer. That's why we're offering an in-depth worldview training course called Activate. 13 different professors teaching 18 sessions, all available online, including a printed workbook to help you apply what you've learned and 1-year access to AFA streaming content to give you even more resources. Find out more about Activate and sign up today at activate.afa.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview.
The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Tuesday, March 24th, and CNBC is reporting that the S&P 500 futures pull back after Monday's rally as oil prices rebound, but the Iran conflict continues. So there are talks between President Trump and Iran, and the Wall Street Journal reporting that Iran worries that the talks might be a trap. So let's welcome in Scott Uehlinger, a former intelligence agent. And how do we think this conflict is going?
Well, obviously, it's thanks, Jenna, for having me on. It's obvious it's going spectacularly well in terms of military success. This is a quantum leap, even above what I personally experienced in 1991 during the original Gulf War. And I think politically, it's going pretty well too, in the sense that Trump's latest gambit about speaking to the power center, even though he was deliberately not specific about it, despite the fact that has generated a bunch of denials from people in the Iranian power structures. Either it's what it's doing is it's splitting the leadership further, that now no one trusts anyone else because, well, wait a minute, I didn't hear about this negotiation. No, wait, I heard about it. And so it's just making them further second-guess themselves. There were reports that some specially cleared people in Iran had cleared it with the Israeli and U.S. Air Force and had flown to Pakistan where they had met and talked. Now, even if it isn't true, it is furthering the war aims by further splintering the leadership.
Yeah, and that's is that part, though, potentially of the strategy of the U.S. to try to kind of confuse, who exactly is the person that they're talking to in terms of a potential deal?
Yes, it is. And what I'm saying, the thing that's really awesome to behold is President Trump's ability to do such things, because literally since World War II, the United States hasn't even thought in terms of in these kinds of terms. We were always supporting the, quote, rules-based order, which means we were Uncle Sucker, as anyone in the military has heard that expression. And, we were extremely predictable in everything we did. And that meant that basically our enemies, from the Koreans to North Vietnamese to, the Middle Eastern terrorists, have just had our address, and they've just, raked us over the coals over the past 40 years. So to suddenly see someone play these people like a Stradivarius is just breathtaking to behold and wonderful.
Yeah, and that's actually encouraging, and kind of obviously goes against the mainstream media narrative that is still, even after 10 years, trying to paint President Trump as sort of this kind of, bumbling figure that doesn't really know what he's doing, and kind of, making his way into these conflicts, having no real idea how to conduct diplomacy, and having no competent people around him. And, we've heard that kind of rhetoric from the mainstream media literally since 2015 about President Trump. And it just isn't true. I mean, yes, are there some people around him that, maybe in my opinion could be better, or, there's differences of opinion? Well, sure, but that's true for any administration. And it doesn't mean overall that President Trump or the people around him are incompetent, or somehow that, for example, a President Kamala Harris would have been any better.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I was just on Middle Eastern TV a couple of days ago with somebody who was apparently an author who had written some screeds against Trump, and the guy was like the pressing the embodiment of the Trump derangement syndrome. He's like trying to tell the audience that at this stage in the game, after being elected twice to president of the United States, he's a huckster. He doesn't know anything. He's shallow. He's stupid. These are the kinds of, I mean, it's unbelievable that there can be still people who soberly say something like that, like Trump is stupid. No, maybe, right, sometimes he's picked flawed advisors, but seems like he's quite on track right now, and he knows exactly what he's doing. And more important, he's able to very quickly adjust himself and come up with like a new policy to reflect something different. I think the biggest example we've seen of that is basically something I've said before a million times, but the Straits of Hormuz are not closed in any sense. There's no gate there. You can't close them. What has been happening is the Iranian government has been jawboning the idea that we can attack any ship entering the straits that we want to, when in fact that is not really true. Every day the U.S. Navy and Air Force are destroying Iran's ability to strike at ships in the Strait of Hormuz. And most importantly, the main thing that's keeping the ships out, so they're somewhat, cowed by the, quote, threat, unquote, of Iran. But mostly it's because Lloyd's of London Insurance has made it so expensive to go in there because of war risk insurance that they're not doing it. So what Trump did literally within 48 hours of when he realized that was the case, this was like more than a week ago, he announced the United States would basically be bankrolling, would substitute for Lloyd's insurance and would underwrite that risk as a way of going against Lloyd's of London. Now, that is 48 hours to basically come up with this idea tells me that it was anticipated, and more, it was not only anticipated, but it's like almost an opportunity to take advantage of. A similar thing that happened in the late 80s with escorting tankers took like 4 months to implement. He did it in 48 hours. So any fool who says that they haven't basically planned out almost every single contingency still has no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. And, and this is why I appreciate having perspectives like yours, Scott Uehlinger, because, we hear so much of this about the confusion of Donald Trump and that, his advisors don't know what they're doing. There's no plan in Iran. There's, all of these kind of doomsday sort of headlines. And to have a different perspective from someone who's actually, been part of military intelligence, for a really long time is very refreshing. And so looking, forward, this conflict is lasting longer than I think, some of us originally anticipated, but at the same time, it's relatively short on the scale of, on the overall scale of the objectives. And so where are we at politically in terms of, because there's kind of some conflicting reports as well on the prices of oil. I was at the gas pump yesterday. It's a little higher, here in Florida. And so people, of course, are getting a little bit nervous about that. How overall does that factor into the political calculation perhaps that Trump is making?
Well, the interesting thing about it is that Trump is like a master of jujitsu, where you use your enemy's energy against him, because it becomes clearer every day. What he's doing is, for instance, with these Straits of Hormuz, the United States is energy independent, and in fact, oil has bifurcated and is cheaper in the United States than in Asia. Asia is like $150 a barrel. In the United States, it's $100 a barrel. And so that's happened, and Trump understands that the American people certainly have a little bit of patience. They can wait a few more weeks. But in the meantime, he's using this anticipated development of the, quote, closure, unquote, of the straits. But he's using that, which the enemy has imposed on him, as a way of pressuring the Europeans to live up to some defensive commitments. So it's really genius. He sees an opportunity, or let's say a difficulty, an obstacle comes up in his overall strategy, and he turns around and immediately uses that obstacle as a way to pressure somebody to do something that they really didn't want to do. So now we have the Europeans very rapidly saying, oh yeah, we're going to help with this, as they understand that most of the oil coming out of the Straits is to finance their economies, not the United States at all. And Trump has been very verbal about that on social media, which is absolutely appropriate, because the Europeans have been freeloading for 30, 50 years, and he's calling them out on it, and he's forcing them to comply.
Yeah, well, again, I just appreciate this analysis so much, and hopefully it's encouraging to our audience to hear the different perspective than you hear on mainstream media, and that's incredibly important. And in the last few minutes or so we have here as well, I want to make sure to get to this story, Scott, because as I'm sure everyone has heard by now, on late Sunday night, there was an airplane crash at LaGuardia Airport. A plane was traveling around 93 to 105 miles per hour, according to ABC News at the time of the ground collision. So what happened was an Air Canada Express flight was landing, and there was another emergency with a United Airlines flight, and so there was a fire truck that was attempting to traverse that same runway to get to the United plane. And apparently, and there's a little bit of a difference of opinion, at least on social media, on the audio, Scott, of exactly what happened, because I think there was a little bit of confusion on where, which runway was to be traversed, where exactly the United plane was, where the Air Canada plane was. But ultimately, air traffic control gave permission for the fire truck to cross the runway, and then kind of immediately realized, no, the Air Canada flight is coming, and tried to warn the truck to stop. It didn't, and it didn't apparently hear. And so the jet crashed into the fire truck, resulting in the tragic death of both pilots, and then dozens of injuries. And so, overall on this, I mean, what do you make of this type of event happening? And a lot of people are blaming air traffic control for this being, around midnight that this occurred, and some saying as well that air traffic control was understaffed.
Right. Well, yeah, right. I have some insight into this because I have some friends who are deeply involved in this industry, and that is almost certainly true. The air traffic control staff all along the East Coast is absolutely flooded, and one major reason that they don't have the right amount of people is because air traffic control is nationalized in the sense that we have a federal system where we do it. It's not in the hands of the private sector. And they began to have, under Biden, a bunch of DEI admissions. And so they were basically bringing in people who were not inherently qualified to do this. So in other words, the failure rate at federal air traffic control schools is out of control because they weren't bringing in the right candidates to start the program. People who were absolutely not suited for this kind of thing. So this is DEI in action, and eventually DEI starts to kill people when you start having architects design bridges that fail, or airplane pilots who don't know what they're doing, et cetera. And so I think this is something that is being addressed, but the problem is it's like turning around an oil tanker. It takes a long time to get this thing right, to change the standards, to get people in a course which I think is at least 18 months long. And so, unfortunately, this is what we're contending with. There's also a huge problem as far as pilot qualification. Pilots are being, and I don't think in this case it's the fault of the pilots at all, but the pilots are, for the major airlines, were being basically taken in on the basis of what color their skin was, et cetera, and the result has been disastrous. I remember reading a figure that said something like, even though pilots who are non-white are about, let's say, 18% of the entire group of pool of pilots in the entire United States, they're responsible for 80% of the collisions and accidents because they are bringing in ill-suited candidates. And so I think that under Trump, this is being addressed. Another thing that maybe should be considered is perhaps changing us over from a federal controlled system of air traffic control to a private like basically kind of do NASA to Elon Musk. Look at how much better SpaceX is doing compared to NASA. Maybe we need to do the same thing to air traffic control.
Yeah, and a lot of people are suggesting that with TSA as well. Like, why not privatize it? Because obviously that has worked overall better than, some of these government systems. But, this is really interesting that you bring up DEI because I hadn't heard, that specifically in a while, and at least related to this particular incident. But it just goes to show that there are still issues with that are affecting Americans today and Canadians. Apparently, this flight was from Montreal, but affecting the air traffic and all of this that is a holdover from the Biden administration. So, what can the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, or the Trump administration overall do to maybe clean this up more quickly? I mean, is there something like in the legal profession, for example, we have to do continuing learning education to keep our licenses active and, and all of that. In Colorado, it was every 3 years. It varies a little bit by state, but it seems like if some of these people aren't actually qualified, there could be a process that perhaps Sean Duffy could implement that says, okay, anyone who hasn't been here, longer than X number of years has to immediately go through, a certain level of training, within the next 6 months to at least perhaps try to resolve some of these issues.
Right. The another thing that can be done is that they can basically recall retired people to supplement. A lot of times the U.S. military has been used, its air traffic control personnel, to assist with things like this. That's not possible right now for obvious reasons. But they can basically also largely expand the training pool. But again, see, these fixes, there's none that are really immediate. They each will take months to implement, but maybe, increase the amount of classes. Obviously, they have to scrap whatever admissions criteria they had and adapt a more modern one, which in fact they probably have already done. It's just that it takes a while to correct these things.
Yeah. And, and unfortunately, I mean, these are the types of incidents that can and occasionally do happen in the interim. And so, overall, do you think that this was really a lack of training on the part of the air traffic controller, or was it additionally a lack of personnel that was on duty at that point in time, or where exactly do you pinpoint fault here?
Yeah, I think that it's basically not in this case necessarily because of the qualification of the personnel. It's that they were simply overburdened. They simply had too much to do because there are not enough people going through the training pipeline. I know we've seen it also. I think that a lot of times, actually, I believe it is JFK that has a shortage of personnel, and Newark, New Jersey, their airport actually had enough air traffic controllers, but they were actually running air traffic control of other airports along the East Coast because they did not have sufficient personnel.
Wow. And, and that's really concerning because when it's something that is obviously this important to safety, that's not something that you can just say, well, okay, we'll be understaffed or, we'll see how it goes. We'll overburden someone who literally has too much to be paying attention to. And so, the fact that these kinds of things are still happening, again, because this is still a federal issue, isn't there something more that the Secretary of Transportation should be doing, telling airports like LaGuardia and elsewhere that they can't be understaffed?
Right. Well, I mean, again, see, that runs into the face of reality, is that basically you have insufficient people, so you've got to increase the training capacity, bring in retired officers. There is a mandatory retirement that is relatively low. I think it's actually 60 or slightly below. So they can waive that and again, cash can do a lot. So you offer cash bonuses to previously retired air traffic controllers who are willing to come back. And, you pay them what they deserve to get them back in because if that is the problem, then that's what you do.
Yeah. Well, really a concerning issue here. And, according to this ABC article, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said LaGuardia's air traffic control is well staffed, but he didn't say how many controllers were working Sunday night. He said the target is 37 controllers overall, and they have 33 certified with 7 in training. So perhaps that's still not enough. But Scott Uehlinger really appreciated praying for all of the families of those involved in this just horrific crash, and we will be right back with more.
This is Abraham Hamilton III with AFR, and we're sending Bibles. Here's Michael with Bible League International.
Abraham, here's a very important update on the effort between AFR and Bible League to bless 4,000 waiting believers this Easter all around the world who have been denied God's Word, and that includes a senior saint in Tanzania.
The area where she was at, she had never seen a printed Bible study or even a Bible until she was in retirement age and received her very first Bible as a result of the generosity of donors. What an incredible gift to her, to that village.
Bibleist believers all over the world are yearning to read the precious resurrection story. Listen, if you love your Bible, if God has used His Word to grow you, give that privilege to others. This Easter, AFR and Bible League want to bless 4,000 waiting believers. You've done it for 1,000, 3,000 to go. So at $5 a Bible, $100 since $20. Will you call 800-YES-WORD? 800-YES-WORD. That's 800-YES-WORD. Or give it sendbiblesnow.org. That's sendbiblesnow.org.
Satan wants to destroy God's sacred design for marriage and family. How do we defend them in this hostile culture? Activate Summit 2026 is July 16th through the 18th at the Cadence Bank Arena in Tupelo, Mississippi. And the focus this year is on God's plan for marriage and family. Speakers include Bert Harper.
Love your neighbor as yourself. Do y'all see the emphasis God puts on that?
Jeff Shreve.
The devil uses people as his pawns, so to speak.
Jessica Peck.
Stepping into their world, what they like, that's a great way to start.
And more. There's also Activate Kids, a separate track for children ages 6 to 12. And something new this year. Get separate tickets for an exclusive meet and greet reception at AFA with the conference speakers on the evening of July 17th. Register now for Roots to Fruit. Grounded in truth, growing in grace. Visit afa.net/summit. afa.net/summit.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Stearns. Stand by for news and commentary next. A shocking number of doctors, nurses, and others in the medical profession are posting online messages threatening to injure conservatives. And in many cases, they're hoping conservatives suffer violent injuries. A labor and delivery nurse at Baptist Health Boca Raton in Florida posted a video hoping Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt suffers medical complications during childbirth. In New York City, a pair of detectives were manhandled and denied treatment at NYC Langone Hospital in the Cobble Hill section of Brooklyn. The medical team thought the detectives worked for ICE. The hospital apologized, but former Mayor Eric Adams said it was a total moral collapse, and apologies are simply not good enough. Those working in hospitals swear an oath to care for their patients. Clearly, that oath has been violated. And now we have to wonder just how many patients were either denied treatment or given inadequate treatment simply because of their conservative political beliefs. I'm Todd Stearns.
They say when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. But what do you do when it feels like life is throwing the lemons at you full force? That's kind of a funny way to think of it, but there are times when there's so much going on in the world and it's happening so fast, you don't know where to go for answers or for encouragement. The solution for that is simple: American Family Radio. You'll find out what's happening and why, what you can do to take action, and it's all from a biblical perspective. What better way to find hope in the middle of a bombardment of lemons? Over the air or with the app on your phone, tablet, Roku TV, or smart speaker, you have AFR at your fingertips pretty much anywhere. And with the podcasts of each program, you can catch up on anything you missed or listen to it again. If you're new or if you've been with us a long time, visit us today. Stop by afr.net. afr.net.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. And there was a very important case argued yesterday at the U.S. Supreme Court. This was a case from Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton's group, which really does amazing work, by the way. If you haven't been following Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch, you should. They bring a lot of lawsuits that are really good and necessary, challenging, some of these issues, particularly with respect to election integrity. And yesterday, Justice Alito gave lawyers a plain English lesson on the meaning of day as the Supreme Court weighs a late ballot fight. So what's going on in this case is basically, what does day mean in terms of election day? Because the Supreme Court is questioning whether ballots can arrive up to 5 days late, which is the current law in Mississippi, and similar policies exist in about 14 states and D.C. So the RNC, who are the challengers, along with Judicial Watch, say that federal statutes set a uniform election day, and day means a day. And, Christians have argued this for a long time. A day is a literal 24-hour period, right? And so that must include casting the ballot and receipt by officials. So if you want to turn in your ballot early, that's fine. But 1 day in terms of actual election day, there shouldn't be all of this sort of arbitrary period afterward. Because the core claim, according to the RNC, is that it prevents moving the goalposts, post-election manipulation, and also, of course, being able to deliver results on the same day. I mean, what Florida has done in terms of cleaning up all of our election issues since, of course, that very infamous case of Bush v. Gore back in 2000, has really helped Florida return results in the same day. And there's literally no reason why every other state in the nation should not do the same thing. So Alito gave the lawyers kind of this plain English lesson on the meaning of day. Listen to this.
We have lots of phrases that involve two words, the second of which is day. Labor Day, Memorial Day, George Washington's birthday, Independence Day, birthday, and Election Day. And they're all particular days. So if we start with that, if I have nothing more to look at than the phrase Election Day, I think this is the day in which everything is going to take place, or almost everything. And then we have 3 points in time. 1844, 1872, 1914. And we can ask, what would people have thought on those days is meant by this phrase, Election Day? Which of those should we choose? Which of those dates should we choose?
So, I mean, Alito, once again, he always just brings clarity and logic to the argument, which you would think would routinely still be at the U.S. Supreme Court, especially with, as significant of cases as these are. But, it seems like logic and common sense and rationality is not used nearly as often as it should be, even at the Supreme Court. So I always appreciate, especially Alito and Thomas, because, some of the other justices, while some of them seemed persuaded that Election Day should be viewed as a single and final day in the election cycle, Roberts, of course, who is always, kind of a windsock, you never know where he's blowing, and then Justice Elena Kagan, of course, an Obama appointee, raised concerns that if the interpretation of Election Day was strictly upheld by the court, then early voting might also be affected. And so Roberts asked the Mississippi Solicitor General, Scott Stewart, if day includes a period after a particular day of the election, does it include a particular day before the day of the election, or does your logic require a different consideration? Which, in my opinion, this is confusing the issue, right? Because if Election Day means Election Day, then that just means a deadline. And so early voting obviously means what it says in plain English. It means early. It means that, yes, you can turn your ballot in early, but if Election Day is the day, then there is a specific deadline. And when the polls close, then it has to actually, your vote has to be received by election officials, not, any of this nonsense about, well, as long as it's postmarked by the day or, all of these things, which is why Republicans have long said that in-person voting is what we prefer, because this just it disincentivizes the system to have loopholes and to have areas of manipulation. I mean, it's the same thing, and Alito was totally right that, when we have holidays or things like Christmas Day, you can prepare, you can wrap your presents, or buy your presents all throughout the year. I mean, like I do. I literally have a Christmas closet upstairs because I don't want to be confined to like the 2 weeks before Christmas and sort of freaking out about what I'm going to get my family and just kind of getting, whatever's available. I like to take my time and, shop throughout the year. But that doesn't change the fact that Christmas Day, there is still a deadline. And if I haven't purchased something and wrapped it and brought it to my family's house by December 25th, that's the deadline. And I think this is so obvious to anybody who is paying any attention whatsoever, or at least living in the real world. But this is where the Supreme Court often will just get so overwhelmed with kind of these definitional nuances and and theory and these theoretical arguments. And literally sometimes I want to tell the US Supreme Court justices, like, go touch grass, literally go live in the real world for like 5 minutes before you take some kind of nonsensical argument and try to that's theoretical and try to apply it to reality. But the argument that Mississippi and the responders in this case suggested that a ballot should still be valid if it was cast by Election Day, even if it arrives later. And so they pointed to a longstanding practice of military and absentee voting, which, of course, President Trump very famously in 2020 was very much, against the mail-in ballots. There definitely are, problems with some of that, which is why I think that there should be a very strict deadline in terms of receipt of the ballot up front, not after the fact. But the defenders also stated historical control over the election mechanics, and that Congress has never explicitly banned late arriving ballots, which, in that case, Congress does need to get involved and should, because late arriving ballots should be, in my opinion, nullified. And you as the voter have the responsibility. And, yes, if you choose to dispatch your vote by mail, you're trusting it to a third person, right? Whoever you mail it through, or the ballot drop box and all that. But you ultimately are responsible for ensuring that your vote is cast. And so what are the justice signaling, though? The conservative justices, and I don't really put Roberts in that category, were skeptical of late ballots arriving. They were concerned, rightfully, I think, about public trust, having clean, bright line rules, not a lot of differences, at least for federal elections within the various states, because, that obviously can have some impact overall on things like presidential elections. And their preference that they articulated was more of a hard election day deadline, where the more liberal wing of the court emphasized state authority, historical flexibility, and they warned against the court's rewriting election rules, which I just think is kind of smoke and mirrors, because if the late arriving ballots or this type of flexibility, quote unquote, as they put it, if that was generally favorable to the interest of Republican candidates, they would be the ones that are hardliners for saying, no, Election Day matters and no ballots after the fact. But this, in my opinion, they want to allow for this type of loophole and gray area that can be manipulated, where if we truly are a country that has free and fair elections, public trust absolutely matters. We need to have these kind of hard deadlines. We need to have clarity versus flexibility. We need to have a uniform rule versus, state kind of experimentation in certain things. Like my former home state of Colorado was one that has had universal vote by mail for quite a while, and in my opinion hasn't particularly gone well. And we need to have finality. And that's a really key principle versus just an emphasis on access. Because, of course, the left is suggesting that there's, disenfranchisement of people whose ballots arrive late and they haven't participated in the system. Well, what about somebody who shows up at the polls the day after Election Day? Are you going to claim that that person is disenfranchised as well? No, we need to have finality. Because not only is that important to the candidates who are running, but that's also important to the electorate to know on Election Day who actually won. So this really matters. This could ultimately affect the 2026 midterms and affect election rules in multiple states and up to hundreds of thousands of ballots potentially impacted. So we likely won't have a result on this case until, later on this spring. But it's going to be very interesting to see where the Supreme Court sides and where the majority is on that. So we need to be praying for the outcome of this case. We'll be right back with more.
On the next Focus on the Family, former U.S. Senator Ben Sasse shares about his recent cancer diagnosis as he reminds you of the most important priorities in life, your relationship with God and your family. It's a touching conversation next time on Focus on the Family with Jim Daly.
Focus on the Family is heard each weekday morning at 5 o'clock Central on American Family Radio.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad. Real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
How about this? Some actual good news on the healthcare front, even as costs just keep skyrocketing. So if you're 65 or older, MediShare now offers MediShare 65 Plus. Call them. You can talk to them about this. A lot of people are taking advantage of this now because even if you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are out-of-pocket things, deductibles and copays that just keep going up. And the whole point is to help you by giving you a low, consistent monthly payment that fills in the gaps. In fact, I can tell you how much MediShare 65 Plus is. For example, it's $99 a month up to age 75. It keeps costs under control. That helps with peace of mind. MediShare is trusted too. It's been around for 30 years, and it's a community of people who help each other. Business owners, retirees, pastors, teachers. People love being part of it. Here's the number you can call now. They are easy to talk to. Call 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, the notorious Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell, I'm sure you've heard that name previously, who killed babies born alive, just a hideous serial killer, has died at age 85 yesterday. So this coming from the New York Post. Kermit Gosnell, a Philadelphia abortion doctor who was convicted in 2013 of killing 3 babies who were born alive in a case that made nationwide headlines, has died. And the Pennsylvania Department of Correction spokesperson said Gosnell died March 1st at a hospital outside the prison system, and he had most recently been incarcerated about 60 miles south of Pittsburgh. The cause of death was not disclosed, but interestingly, the cause of death was natural causes. He was able to live his life all the way until natural death. And his crime was that he foreclosed, of course, the lives of at least 3. It was at least just what he was convicted for, but at least 3. And we know there are far more than that. Innocent children, and their lives were foreclosed through the murder of abortion. And so let's welcome in Father Frank Pavone, the founder of Priests for Life. And, Father Frank, it was just such a stark contrast to me to see that, someone who is a heinous murderer like this of an abortionist, he should have gotten the death penalty. I mean, this is where Christians and conservatives are consistent. If we advocate for the death penalty after due process for murder, I think that's very clear in Scripture that the state carries the sword, and that's the correct punishment from the state for taking a life. And yet, while he's been incarcerated since 2013, he was able to live out his life until natural death. And, at least now he is getting justice that is imposed by God himself.
Yeah, well, it's amazing that he was in jail at all. I was very involved in the Gosnell case behind the scenes and also publicly. And Jenna, one of the things that people need to recognize is that his ultimate conviction for the abortions he did, even killing babies after they were born, and also killing patients too. Carmanayan Mongar was one of his patients, and due to his negligence, she was killed. He was convicted of manslaughter in her case. But all of this came to light not because the state of Pennsylvania was willing to go after his abortion practices. His clinic was raided on drug-related investigations. The pro-abortion administration of Governor Tom Ridge at the time deliberately stopped the annual inspection of abortion clinics. There were complaints about what was going on at Gosnell's place. He had untrained staff, medical equipment that didn't work, expired medications, all kinds of filthy conditions, bodies of babies being saved in the refrigerator in milk cartons and orange juice containers. All these horrors. And the state did not intervene. And the Ridge administration said, well, we don't want to put any hindrance in the way of people getting abortions. So the annual inspections of these clinics for the health and safety of these women were stopped in the interest of unhindered, undelayed abortion. So first of all, it's amazing that he was even brought to trial, because my main point about this case is, and people can find out more at KermitGosnell.com, that's one of our websites, KermitGosnell.com. I urge people to go there and read about this, is that he is not the exception. He is the model of what goes on in the abortion industry. Americans United for Life published a book called Unsafe, showing the violations going on clear across the country. These are legal clinics that people presume are safe. High school students administering anesthesia, expired medications, people that just don't know what in the world they're doing and don't care. This is the norm in the abortion industry. And sure, this is a sliding scale. Some places are, better managed than others. But ultimately, Jenna, I have a phrase I love repeating, which is, you can't practice vice virtuously. If your conscience is so seared that you can pull the arms and legs off babies and throw them in the garbage, you're not going to be concerned about OSHA standards, reporting, medical guidelines, medication expirations, or proper training of staff. Your conscience is dead. And I sat behind Gosnell in that courtroom, and I saw on his face what I have seen on the faces of many abortionists that I have helped actually transition out of the abortion industry. And there was like this calm smirk, like, oh, nothing is wrong, I'm fine. They're dehumanized. What they're doing dehumanizes them as they dehumanize both the babies and their mothers. So yeah, it's a good time to go back and learn the lessons of the Gosnell case.
It is. And, so well said that it is actually surprising that he was brought to trial at all. And you're absolutely right because, while this conviction, we can, and even then, mainstream media will say, he killed children after, they were born alive. And this is this is heinous. And they say all of those things and they characterize it that way. That's the very same media that is advocating for and protecting the abortion industry that does this on a routine basis. And so there's a real disconnect here between the social contempt and the stigma for Gosnell personally versus the social protection for abortionists who that's their routine mentality and what they believe that women should have access to. I mean, how are we in such a post-truth society that can simultaneously argue two obviously conflicting arguments?
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things we have to point out, too, is that this scenario that unfolded, and I urge people to read the grand jury report, is that this whole idea that, we don't want to put a hindrance in the way of people getting an abortion, so let's stop inspecting the clinics. Jenna, the battles we have right now in 2026 in Virginia, for example, this extreme abortion amendment that the Democrats are putting onto the ballot, this is exactly what that amendment and others like it that have passed in Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, and other places say exactly that. They not only say abortion should be kept legal. That's just the beginning of it. They say no hindrance, no obstacle, no delay, nothing whatsoever to in any way restrict or hinder, directly or indirectly, for a little while, for 10 minutes, for 10 seconds. When you have that mindset, and that's what these amendments are pushing, you end up with situations like Gosnell. He could have been stopped. But they, no, we can't not only not interfere with the right of a woman to get an abortion, we can even delay it for the sake of inspecting the clinic. So, yeah, Jenna, we like you say, the very things we end up complaining about are the things that that we're actually promoting and pushing if we are the abortion advocates.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's a little bit of a disconnect as well within the Trump administration, at least as to the abortion pill and where the administration, which President Trump has been since his first term, very strongly pro-life, and that has been a very good thing. But there have been some inconsistencies in his administration in that respect, and so where do you see those disconnects?
Well, I think that we have political dynamics going on that are delaying the evaluation and research into the harmful effects of the mifepristone. I believe that the administration will continue that investigation. They've said that they would. I think once we're past the midterms, I think what we're seeing is, the clash of politics and principle things that have to get done that I think many people are acknowledging have to get done. But that's what I'm hoping, what I'm advocating for, and what I'm being told, and others are being told, is that an objective review of the impact of these drugs is something that, of course, again, the abortion industry is afraid of. And I think that if the FDA, HHS, and the whole administration keep on that track, we really will have them on the run, because the studies are already out there. They just want to make sure that any change in policy regarding the norms surrounding these abortion drugs are done not like they're done under the Democrats. It's just done by politics. They want it to be based on really solid scientific evidence, which we know, the Democrat side and the pro-abortion side constantly ignore as they invoke the mantra, follow the science. They constantly ignore the science, at least when it comes to abortion.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, it's so obvious from a moral, ethical, biological, reality-based standpoint that life begins at conception and is worth protecting all the way until natural death. And yet somehow we still think that this issue is debatable in 2026, like we think stupidly that the definition of a woman or a man is debatable. I mean, there are just some things that the truth of reality is so stark that human beings do not have the control to legislate otherwise or to manufacture our reality. And and yet this is the consequence of sin and the especially the feminist movement and especially the sexual revolution that doesn't want to have the consequences of their actions, and unfortunately takes that out on the weakest among us and children. And so this is still in 2026 a really important fight. And overall, as we kind of barrel toward the midterms, are there any initiatives and all of this that you would like our AFR family to know about ahead of November that are upcoming, either good or that need to be defeated?
Well, yes. Let me give a specific project here. As we continue to talk within the pro-life, pro-family movement about abortion and specifically like these, the Democrats have not at all backed away from their stance. You see the Senate candidate in Texas, I've written about him, Tallarico, I'm a seminarian, I'm going to be a pastor. He's quoting the Bible all the time about transgender and abortion and everything. Look, we have a project called Is This What You Mean? And people can learn about this at, we have a website, lateabortion.org. I believe, Jenna, along with what we've already said, we got to focus on these chemical abortions, yes, but the most strategically promising route is to awaken the public about the extremism of the other side on late-term abortion. And Is This What You Mean? Simply says, you take the quotes, and we provide them on the website, of the description of the procedure in the latest stages of pregnancy. You take they use the word dismemberment, decapitation, and you ask the candidate on the other side, when you say the word abortion, sir, ma'am, is this what you mean? See, it's not even an argument about making it legal or illegal. It's not even an argument whether it's ethical or not. It's going to the very basic first step of any argument or any discussion, defining your terms. So Tallarico, or any of you folks that are running on the Democrat side, we know already, even if you don't bring up the abortion issue, that you're extreme on this issue. But first of all, we want to know if you know what the word even means. So dismemberment, decapitation, that's from the medical textbook. That's not from the Bible. That's not from us. It's from the medical books. When you say the word abortion, is this what you mean? And I think, Jenna, this has to be asked at town hall meetings. This has to be asked at press conferences. This has to be asked continuously. If we do that going into this cycle, we're going to see some dramatic moments that I think will wake up the consciences of a lot of pro-life voters.
Yeah, that's such a great point that, the left tries to really gloss over what's actually going on and the horrors and heinousness of abortion. And if they're forced to confront that reality and say, okay, is this what you're actually affirming? Is this the definition that you're actually providing? I mean, that will at least force them to either say yes and show that they have such a seared conscience that they could possibly do that, or kind of try to back their way out of it. But, I really think that that's, Father Pavone, I think that that's also where a lot of even the Christians that advocate for some abortions in some circumstances really haven't been confronted with the actual definition of what really happens. Yes. Otherwise, they wouldn't.
That's right. No, that's right. Looatabortion.org is another site I want to throw out there because that's key to these arguments. Like you say, even if they want to make some exceptions here and there, well, you're making an exception of what? What is the actual thing that you're doing? And until we actually look at it, we don't necessarily have a fully informed opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why, again, not only definitions matter, but, reality and the truth of reality matters because if we just allow for all of this wordplay and sort of vagary from the left, then unfortunately even Christians can be held captive by some of those wrong definitions and end up advocating for things that ultimately are not true. They're not righteous, and it's because we're not willing, perhaps, to come to terms with the truth of reality and the truth of those definitions. But Frank Pavone, I really, really appreciate you coming on this morning. Kind of last minute with these with this headline this morning, and so I really appreciate your time. And again, I just think it's so unfair that someone like Kermit Gosnell was able to live out his life until his natural death while promoting abortion and actually engaging in it for that long. And so we need to have the standard that we protect life as a society. So as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
It's been proven again and again and again.
Bert Harper.
The verification of the dates, the verification of the genealogies, it puts spiritual iron in my spiritual blood to know that we can depend upon the Word of God.
Exploring the Word, weekday afternoons at 3 Central on American Family Radio. This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported